National anthem of Ukraine.
Шановні пані,
Dear ladies and gentlemen, we opened the 17th Kyiv Security Forum meeting, and we welcome all the guests, new and old-time friends of the forum from near and afar.
we are pleased to welcome all of you at the 17th Annual Kyiv Security Forum. Welcome all guests that came here from near and far, all of our friends, new and old. Запрошую на сцену засновника і голову
I invite to the stage the founder and the chairman of the Kyiv Security Forum.
For centuries, Ukrainians have fought to secure their right to statehood and self-determination.
The 20th century saw Ukraine endure the horrors of 2 world wars. The First World War brought the collapse of empires, giving Ukraine a chance at independence. On January 22, 1919, in Kyiv St. Sophia Square, the Ukrainian people united into a single sovereign state, establishing diplomatic relations with dozens of countries worldwide. As the Red Army advanced westward, fierce Ukrainian resistance disrupted the Bolsheviks' ambitions of dominating Europe. Nevertheless, in 1921, the Treaty of Riga was signed between Soviet Russia and Poland, leading to the partition of Ukrainian territory. To Soviet Russia, Ukraine was little more than a granary and a source of raw materials. Yet it also remained a persistent threat, a land prone to uprisings. Kremlin policies evolved into outright genocide of Ukrainians. The Holodomor of 1932 to 1933 was the darkest chapter of this period. A man-made famine designed to break the Ukrainian spirit through starvation. Estimates suggest up to 3.5 million Ukrainians were killed. The Holodomor foreshadowed the Holocaust, another state-orchestrated mass murder that claimed the lives of around 6 million Jews and millions of others under the Nazi regime.
Überhaupt aufzulösen und den kleinen Rest, der
Within just 2 years of Hitler's rise to power, the Third Reich's troops marched unopposed into the demilitarized Rhineland, annexed Austria, and initiated the Sudetenland crisis. Britain and France responded with a policy of appeasement. On September 1st, 1939, the deadliest and most widespread war in human history began, World War II, which would ultimately claim up to 75 million lives. Celebrating their joint occupation of Poland, Nazi and Soviet troops marched together in a parade through the streets of Brest on September 19th. But on June 22nd, 1941, Hitler would betray his former ally, launching a brutal invasion of the Soviet Union. Under Nazi occupation, civilian losses in Ukraine are estimated at around 7 million. Meanwhile, 7 million Ukrainians served in the ranks of the Red Army, Another 250,000 fought in the armies of Poland, the United States, Canada, and France. Hundreds of thousands joined the Ukrainian insurgent army, resisting both Nazi and Soviet forces. Even after the return of Soviet rule to Western Ukraine, the UPA continued its resistance for nearly a decade. In February 1945, the leaders of the United States, the United Kingdom, and the USSR convened at the Yalta Conference, which granted Moscow control over much of Eastern Europe. Yalta legitimized the continent's division, drawing a line of iron that would separate East and West for the next 45 years, with the Berlin Wall a haunting symbol of that division. Soviet troops would not fully withdraw from Eastern Europe until the early 1990s. The fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989, followed by a failed coup in Moscow in August 1991, ultimately spelled the end of the Soviet Union. After regaining its independence, Ukraine inherited the world's third-largest nuclear arsenal. Under pressure from international partners, Kyiv agreed to relinquish its nuclear weapons in exchange for security assurances. In December 1994, Ukraine signed the Budapest Memorandum, with the United States, the United Kingdom, and Russia pledging to uphold its sovereignty and territorial integrity. A year later, after complex negotiations, Ukraine and Russia signed the Treaty on Friendship, Cooperation, and Partnership, commonly known as the Big Treaty. With it, Russia officially recognized Ukraine's borders as inviolable. In 2000, a former KGB officer, Vladimir Putin, rose to power in Russia. Channeling the legacy of 20th century dictators, his presidency began with a wave of violent terror attacks, political assassinations, and brutal crackdowns on journalists and opposition voices. Calling the collapse of the Soviet Union the greatest geopolitical catastrophe of the century, Putin set his foreign policy on a singular course, the revival of a fallen empire. By 2008, Russian troops invaded Georgia. The West's feeble response to the aggression only emboldened the Kremlin's strongman, setting the stage for further confrontations on the global stage. On November 21, 2013, as the government abruptly abandoned its path towards Europe, a spark of protest ignited in Kyiv. What began as a peaceful demonstration of students and citizens soon transformed into a powerful national awakening, a movement forever known as the Revolution of Dignity. Having lost hope of subjugating Ukraine from within through a fifth column, in 2014 he seized and annexed Ukraine's Crimean Peninsula. Soon after, Russia began a bloody war in eastern Ukraine, occupying the cities of Donetsk and Luhansk. Hitler launched his war as a quest for revenge, a response to Germany's defeat in the First World War. Putin, too, seeks his revenge, viewing the collapse of the Soviet Union and the end of the Cold War as a historic humiliation. The Kremlin's autocrat echoes the rhetoric of the Führer. Just as Hitler once justified military expansion as a mission to protect Germans beyond the Reich, Putin has framed his invasion of Ukraine as a campaign to defend Russian-speaking citizens of Donbass. On February 24, 2022, Russia launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine, unleashing the first major continental war in Europe this century and dismantling the post-World War II system of collective security. Once again, the world is confronted with a regime bent on redrawing borders by force, a regime veering toward modern totalitarianism. This new ideology has been dubbed Rashism, a toxic fusion of fascism and the Russian idea. On the temporarily occupied Ukrainian territories, Russian forces have revived the darkest practices of the Nazi era: mass executions, deportations, and cruelty inflicted on civilians. The massacres in Bucha and Izium, the mass extermination of civilians in Mariupol, all have become harrowing symbols of Moscow's genocidal campaign. The atrocities, war crimes, and acts of sexual violence committed by Russian invaders have stunned the world and exposed the brutal reality behind the Kremlin's ambitions. In February 2022, many believed that Ukraine would not withstand the onslaught. But the Ukrainian people proved their ability to defeat Russian military aggression. Today, we face another global aggressor. This is not only Ukraine's war. This is a war against the free world. That is why the Kyiv Security Forum calls on the world. Unite again. We defeated the global aggressor once. We must do it again.
А зараз запрошую на сцену
And now I invite to the stage the chairman and founder of the Kyiv Security Forum, the Prime Minister of Ukraine 2014-2016, Mr. Arseniy Yatsenyuk.
You know, frankly, I have mixed emotions after the movie that has been displayed. On the one hand, today we are commemorating the anniversary, the 18th anniversary of our joint victory against the Nazis. On the other hand, my country is at the state of war. And could you imagine how could it happen that those who had been fighting against the Nazis, they present the Nazi policy, I mean Russians. First, let me commemorate those who perished in the Second World War and those who perished in actually the Third World War waged by Putin against the free world. Please, minute of silence for those dead in the Second World War and in war against Ukraine. Thank you. So it's been 80 years. 80 years since Nazi Germany surrendered unconditionally. And Allied forces prevailed. I believe that the time will come when a contemporary Hitler, which is President Putin, will surrender with his inhumane ideology, with the war crimes that he committed against the Ukrainian people, with the genocidal war that he launched against my country. And the only way how we can win is to unite again. We did it 80 years ago, and we will succeed on this righteous way towards restoring the global order. As of now, we are living in a completely different world. Let's be frank, we all reap the benefits of the peace, but there is no more benefits and dividends of peace. What we are getting right now, we are getting the trauma of war. But to overcome this trauma, there is only one solution on the table, is to square the wagons, to close our ranks, to stay united, and to respond with an enormous strength and will in order to stop this war. We can draw the lessons out of the history. Appeasement policy always leads to an aggression. And I kindly request everyone to remember that in 1938, at that time, the free world, they were eager to cut the deal with Hitler. What happened in the end? Hitler waged the Second World War. In 2014, after the contemporary Hitler illegally annexed Crimea and sent his troops to Donetsk and Lugansk, the free world tried to cut the similar deal. What happened in the end? In 2022, he waged a full-fledged invasion of Ukraine. So, no more appeasement policy. In order to get peace, we have to show the real strength. I've had a lot of different pundits and politicians saying that, look, the only way to get this peace is only through diplomatic channels and within the diplomatic framework. Let me strongly disagree with this. I do not foresee any chance to get the peace with Russia only via diplomatic means. Diplomacy has to be underpinned by military strength. This is the only language that Putin really understands. Putin's strategic goal, they hasn't changed. So his strategic goal is to take over Ukraine. He can change tactics. To take over Ukraine, to undermine NATO, to dismantle the European Union, to commit acts of sabotage in the European Union, to have a number of proxy forces in the EU, and frankly speaking, Ukrainian military, we stopped Russian military. But Putin already deployed his proxy military in the European Union and in the free world. He is doing sabotage. He has a huge political representation, and look what's happening in Europe with all these forces. They are not far-right forces. These forces actually present and support and underpin totalitarian ideology. That's what happened in a part of Germany, in Romania, in Hungary, and in the rest of the world. In order to stop the war, we need to get a very coherent and consistent plan. My message to the US administration and to those who want to negotiate with Putin, it's true, Mr. President, I mean President Trump, that Putin wants to negotiate with you. Putin is even ready to play the golf with the new US president, but the only problem is he is ready to play golf on his ice rink because he is playing hockey. And that's the key difference. So what is needed? A consistency and a strong and joint plan. How to bring the real peace. And we cannot get this peace via any kind of concessions. Concessions only increase the appetite of these beasts. We concede too much. We've paid with our blood and flesh for the security of Europe and for the security of the world. And it is our joint fight. And we really commend and we are very grateful to the EU member states, to NATO member states, to the United States, with the help that you provided to Ukraine. If not you, it would be practically impossible for Ukraine to withstand. But as we are together, it's completely possible for Ukraine and for all of us to win and to prevail in this war. Those who claimed neutrality, and let me directly address China and so-called global south. Those who claim neutrality, or those who want to present themselves as mediators, have to realize you can be neutral in this war. You have to take sides. Otherwise, it's a kind of complicity in the war crimes and everything that Putin did against Ukraine and against the free world. So, in order to prevail, the second issue is that this kind of strong and consistent plan must be based on a few pillars. The first one is military support. And we ask the US government and new US president to provide a new security supplement for Ukraine. This is the only solution how to bolster Ukrainian military and how to show to Putin that President Trump's motto, peace through strength, is a reality, but not just a hot air. The second one is sanctions. On the one hand, it's hard to imagine that such countries like Iran, North Korea, that under the sanctions for decades, they've managed to provide millions of shells, armored vehicles, and ammo to the belligerent Russia. But we need to wrap up sanctions and to exert an enormous economic pressure on Russia in order really to bring Putin to this negotiating table. As of now, he is not eager to negotiate. He is ready to accept Ukrainian capitulation. And Ukraine will never surrender, never. Ukraine became a kind of real stronghold for the European and the global security. We have showed to the entire world that despite the fact that Russia is armed to the teeth, that Russia has allies like China and other tyrants and dictators, despite the fact that Russia has nukes, we have guts, will, and resilience to withstand and to stop Russian military. We are bruised, but we are not broken. We are tired, but we are not exhausted. And we know that the time will come when Ukraine and the free world is to prevail. And this is the very idea of this conference. Let's unite again. And let's win. Slava Ukraini.
Glory to Ukraine. Glory to the heroes.
Шановні пані та панове, сьогодні 8 травня, День перемоги у Другій.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, today on the 8th of May, as the day of victory in the Second World War 80 years ago, the world nations united to prevail over the global aggressor. So this year, the Kyiv Security Forum has as its motto and even call, let's unite again, because with this union, this heavy victory was reached. And this victory we will celebrate tomorrow on the 9th of May at the 40th day of Europe as an official celebration of the European Union, because European Union must be the best example of such unique unity in our history. So let us start this forum from paying tribute to Ukrainian armed forces. We have video calls in which their tribute to the Ukrainian armed forces is expressed by the top military leaders of NATO and European Union.
On this day of remembrance, we honor the countless lives lost in the fight against tyranny and oppression during the Second World War. We remember the courage of those who stood for freedom, the same courage we recognize in you today. For over 3 years now, 1,169 days, you have defended your nation with unbreakable spirit and unwavering resolve. You are not just fighting for Ukraine, for your families and your fellow citizens. You are standing on the front lines of democracy and the right for freedom.
The shadow of authoritarianism has cast its darkness over Europe. But once again, like-minded nations are working together to prevent its spread. This is showcased today at the 17th Kyiv Security Forum, yet no one is working harder or sacrificing more than the brave people of Ukraine and your courageous security forces.
Nobody knows better the Ukraine citizen that it is not an abstract matter that is at stake. Today we discuss how to prevent World War III. At the same time, we are witnessing the fight of the Ukrainian people and the armed forces of Ukraine, waging the war for civilization itself.
We have to protect, nurture, and defend those freedoms that were achieved 80 years ago. This is not something of the past. This is clearly something of the present, and it's Ukraine that is leading the way and demonstrating the importance of that preservation and what it means when those freedoms are attacked and what it means to have to defend those freedoms.
When I visited Ukraine in February, I was truly impressed by the capabilities, the discipline and endurance of the Ukrainian armed forces. The Ukrainian ability for rapid and flexible civil-military cooperation and innovation is outstanding and represents an area from which we can derive significant lessons. During my visit, I was also profoundly impressed by the strong sense of resilience manifested by the entire Ukrainian population. Clearly, the battle is not confined solely to the battlefield. The entire society is and must be involved.
Norway will continue to support Ukraine, both in the short term, in the current fight, but also in the medium term to regain territory, and in the long term to support the rehabilitation and the build-up of a new Ukraine Defense Force. We will also support in the reconstruction of Ukraine after fighting has stopped.
Support goes beyond equipment and training. It's also about a shared understanding of the threat we face. Ukraine is on the front line of a confrontation between democracy and aggression, between international order and lawlessness. That's why your fight is our fight. And it's why we must remain united, determined, and prepared.
We pay tribute to your fallen heroes who have given everything in this struggle. Their memory strengthens our commitment to support Ukraine, to uphold our values. Sisters and brothers of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, your courage today is a gift to tomorrow. Today is not only about remembering the past. It's about shaping the future. A future where Ukraine is free, sovereign, and secure. For every NATO nation, from every uniform we wear, we salute you. Slava Ukraini!
Slava Ukraini!
Slava Ukraini!
Slava Ukraini!
Slava Ukraini!
Slava Ukraini!
Шановні гості, Київський безпековий форум має честь.
Guests, Kyiv Security Forum has an honor to give the floor to the soldiers, defenders of Ukraine, who want to say to the world what Ukraine really needs for the victory. The floor is given to the commander of the battalion of UAVs, Captain Vyacheslav Shutenko, deputy commander of the company of UAVs, Senior Lieutenant Pavlo Yatsenyuk, Senior Sergeant Valery Yarila Horishny from the 1st Corps Azov of the National Guard of Ukraine, and Chief of the Medical Service of the 3rd Corps of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Victoria Avicenna Kovac. Captain Shutenko, the floor is yours.
Taking this opportunity, I would like to express gratitude on behalf of my battalion to all people, all organizations, all volunteers, all our international partners who still stand with Ukraine side by side, who support the armed forces of Ukraine, and who generally support Ukraine in this big struggle for our independence and our existence. Thank you very much. This applause are for you. Talking about current situation on the battlefield, I should say that this war has changed. I joined the armed forces of Ukraine on the very beginning of the full-scale invasion, and in 2022, this war was different. It was, you know, more or less classical. But in 3+ years, today, this war is about technology, this war is about precision, and this war is about speed. Unmanned systems are no longer an auxiliary. They are decisive on the battlefield. That's why, to win, Ukraine needs more drones, more unmanned systems. We need to have scalable production of drones and uninterruptible supply of drones to the military and combat units of Ukraine. The second thing we need, we still need people in infantry and assault units. And I will explain why. We will not win this war only using the unmanned systems. We still need infantry in a position that will repel Russian attacks. And of course, if we want to get our temporarily occupied territories back, we need well-trained and motivated assault units that will perform the effective and successful offensive operations. Third thing to win we need is military education, quality military education, and continuous training. We need to scale and to spread and transfer the best combat experience, the best technologies, the best tactics that we have at the moment. You know, Ukrainian armed units, our brigades, they are very different in their level of combat, their combat level. And we should do our best in order to make this level as high as possible in average. And the fourth thing, and the most important thing, to my opinion, that we should do and that we should have, it's continuous international support. We still need this continuous international support. We need support in diplomacy, we need sanctions on Russian economy, we need aviation, we need artillery, we need tanks, and etc., etc. And dear ladies and gentlemen, we need all this stuff not only because we want it. We need all this stuff because here in Ukraine, we fight against one of the most powerful armies in the world. And we fight not only for our independence, we fight not only for our territorial integrity, we also fight for the free world, we fight for democracy, and we fight for European values and international security. And that is why we should unite again. And if we manage that, if we do that in our best, we will cause such losses and such damage to our enemy that Russians will beg us to negotiate and will beg us for peace. That is the way we should pass. Thank you very much for your attention. Stand with Ukraine. Glory to Ukraine.
Старший лейтенант Павло Яценюк, до речі, це родич.
Pavlo Yatsenyuk is a relative of the founder of Kyiv Security Forum, Arseny Yatsenyuk. So, Captain, the floor is yours. Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank the Ukrainian people for their resilience and bravery. I would also like to thank our international partners for bringing this victory closer. I've come from the direct axis where my unit and I use UAVs to conduct our missions, and every assault mission means dozens of saved lives. That's why we do need UAVs, we do need armament, we need armed vehicles to ensure safety of our crews. For logistical supplies, we need high precision ammunition to destroy their logistics and their artillery. We also need training and innovative technologies. That would be the formula of our victory. Today, on the 8th of May, the day of remembrance and reconciliation, I wish we could speak about the peace. But to me, peace is all about the victory. The victory over this barbarian Russian universe that is trying to destroy us. That's the victory of freedom over tyranny. And as 80 years ago, we can achieve this victory only when we come together. United we stand, and we will be able to fight this evil that came from the swamps on the in the north. And they are still trying to show to the world that they are mighty, that they are still an empire. Thank you very much, and glory to Ukraine. Glory to the heroes. Senior Lieutenant Valery Korishny, the floor is yours.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to speak English so that everyone in this place will understand me. Today I stand in front of you as not only a sergeant, the senior sergeant of the Azov Brigade, and not only as an ex-prisoner of war, but also as a voice for those who are still there in the Russian captivity, who still suffer every single day and experiencing tortures and harassment and sexual harassment and abuse as well. I was lucky enough, because of all of you guys, to get back home after my captivity in the Russian prisons. I've spent there 2.5 years. But because of your support, because of the support of the whole world, everyone, I guess the whole world knows what Azov is. And everyone knows about our courage in Mariupol. In Mariupol, we stood for 86 days in total encirclement, outnumbered, with a very limited ammunition. But still, we had determination. We had determination and courage. And on behalf of my brigade, of our corps, I would like to ask the world for the same determination regarding Ukraine, towards Ukraine. We need more weapons. We need more drones, as it was said before. And but first of all, we need courage, discipline, and determination, because some people may be afraid of the psychopath agent, but we had this courage in Mariupol and also in in many different parts of this war on the territories of Ukraine. And the other thing that I would like to ask is to do everything possible and impossible to get our boys and girls back home from the Russian captivity, because every single day people are dying there and the conditions are super tough. Like it's a very limited amount of food, not nutritious at all, tortures, beatings, and everything. I mean, you already know this, everyone knows this. And I guess there is another very important issue as for this war and as for any treaties that would be signed, I don't know, is that 80 years ago, after the Second World War, there was this Nuremberg process, and the Nazi war criminals were accused of very horrible war crimes. But unfortunately, the Soviet war criminals just got along somehow, and we must not forget now of all the war criminals that Russian soldiers and commanders have done and have been doing nowadays in Ukraine. So there might be some kind of process for those people who have done different horrible war crimes in Ukraine, including sexual harassment, abuse, killings, rapes, looting, and everything. So we need weapons to fight, unity to stand firm, and faith. Of course, the faith in our victory. We need victory, not just peace. Thank you.
Now I would like to give the floor to Victoria Kovac. She is chief of the medical unit of the Army Corps. The floor is yours.
Hello everyone and Slava Ukraini. I am really grateful to all partner countries who have supported and continue to support us in this fight to preserve our independence. Since the full-scale Russian invasion, we have been gaining very difficult and unique experience in saving lives in the conditions when our enemy use prohibited weapons, make terrorism to our civilian population, and destroyed energy infrastructure. And we are continuing to saving these lives. However, we know why and for whom we are fighting. Not only why, but for whom, firstly. Military medicine is first and foremost is about the confidence that I will have care for me, medicine care. And because the highest value that we can protect is the person, his life, his health, and his honor and his dignity. Medicine, it's about dignity, firstly. Victory begins with saving lives. Behind every successful assault operation, behind every soldier on the front line, there is a medic care under fire that taking back alive. And our ability to win depends not only how we fight, but how we care. Ukraine requires a robust system of military medicine and evacuation. There is an urgent need of armored vehicles because it's about first point of evacuation from the battlefield and about the first point of possibility to saving people's life. Secondary, we really need additional tactical medical supplies because it's the first part of medical care. And a constant supply of the most advanced training equipment because it's about possibility to know how to use this equipment and then evacuate guys from the battlefield. Every minute we gain can mean the difference between life and death. The Ukrainian medical military system is setting new standards of care in these challenging circumstances. With appropriate international assistance, we have the potential to establish a precedent of future resilience and recovery. The entire civilized world, I think, that understands the Ukraine's role in this fight against imperialist threat. And now we need a stronger unity now against a terrorist country to ensure democratic rights and freedom, not only for Ukraine, but for the whole world. Thank you.
Я маю для панелі таке наступне запитання.
I've got a question to all of the panelists if we go in the reverse order, okay? Oftentimes in the world, even amongst our partners and friends who support us, we hear that no matter what technologies, the scope of assistance, the correlation between the forces will always be in favor of Russia because Russia is stronger, they've got more resources, they've got more troops available. So what would you respond to such people? Where is their flaw, their major mistake, do you think?
Maybe I will use not my mind, but Sun Tzu said that if you have a larger enemy, you should be smarter. We should be smarter.
Запрошую вас до слова. Так.
Thank you for your question. Yeah, of course we are outnumbered, and all the wars that Russia and the previous forms of Russia, the Soviet Union, the Russian Empire, all the wars that they participated in, they always had this advantage of numbers of people, yeah, because they have much more people. But the truth is that the modern war is totally different, and the first-person view drones, FPV drones, is the main clue to this war, I guess. But still, just recently we have celebrated the Infantry Day in Ukraine. Still, all the wars, they are won by the infantry, by the regular soldier who stands on his land and protects his homeland. So we need infantry in any way, and we need soldiers, and we need new recruits who would go and protect our country, our children, our women. And I have maybe a little message for those men who do not want to serve in the Ukrainian country, in Ukrainian army. I guess everyone would go to war because Russia would not stop. Maybe they will take a pause, but they would not stop. So everyone will be fighting. So it's better to be prepared and maybe to do some exercise, do some sports, learn some medicine, to go to some courses, to be prepared, and then to go to a good, high professional unit or brigade such as Azov or 3rd Assault Brigade or any other unit which is professional. This is, I guess, the main issue here. Thank you.
Дуже дякую вам. Павло Яценюк.
Thank you. Pavlo Yatsenyuk, please.
We can win if we will be smarter, like the point is new technologies and innovations. And the second thing, we are not attacking, we are on defense, and this is a big point that we can win. Thank you.
Так, дуже важливо. Капітане Шутенко.
Yes, it's very important. Captain Shutenko. I will respond in Ukrainian because I think this is primarily about our domestic reforms. So this message is primarily for the Ukrainians. No matter how many people we draft into the military, Russians will have the advantage anyway. We will never manage to create a bigger army than in Russia. And Russia is not alone on that side fighting us. This war is approaching the scale of the World War because the North Korea has already joined Russia in this war, and they don't even deny it. So what I'm trying to say is that we have to efficiently use whatever we have in terms of manpower, technologies, UAVs, and so on. And here we need exactly what I said in my previous intervention. We need to learn the best practices from our highly professional units. We have quite a lot of them, and their professional level is really top-notch, like Azov, the 3rd Assault Brigade, and so on. And it's very good that these brigades now are forming corps. The corps-based military system is designed to be able to use the best practices, the best technologies, the best lessons learned, and the best tactics which were tested on the battlefield, and to spread them on a wider scale. This is the only way we can win. And, of course, international support matters a lot. Thank you very much. Allow me to express to you and to all men and women in the armed forces of Ukraine and to express our gratitude for what you do. Thank you very much. And now we offer to you attention to a special video address from Deputy Secretary General of NATO, Radmila Shikarinska.
Dear friends, it is a privilege to share with you today NATO's message of solidarity and support for Ukraine. I have seen the face of courage. It is the face of the Ukrainian veterans I have met. They embody the unbreakable spirit of a proud nation. When the Russian onslaught began, these brave soldiers did not falter, and Ukraine did not fall. The men and women of this country have served with bravery, strength, and determination. It is important to remember their service and their sacrifice. It is also important to remember the resilience of the civilian population. They continue to suffer as a result of Russia's war of aggression. Terror from the skies targets civilians, destroying homes, schools, hospitals, and energy infrastructure. We will not forget the deadly missile attack on Kyiv last month. We will not forget the strike on Sumy on Palm Sunday. And we will not forget the hundreds of thousands killed or wounded throughout Russia's brutal war. Ukraine's people have endured so much. They deserve real peace, real safety, and real security. At this critical moment, there should be no doubt. NATO stands with Ukraine. We stood with you from the beginning, we stand with you today, and we will stand with you throughout the challenges ahead. NATO allies and partners have provided unprecedented military support to Ukraine, including critical air defenses, as well as essential financial and humanitarian aid. NATO will continue to help Ukraine so that it can defend itself today and deter any future aggression. Our commitment is clear and concrete. I have been to NATO's command in Germany and have seen how it is leading the coordination of security assistance and training for Ukraine. I was there when the first ever joint NATO-Ukraine organization opened its doors in Poland. The Joint Analysis, Training and Education Center will help us all learn the lessons from the war. NATO allies are continuing to step up for Ukraine. In the first 3 months of 2025, they have already pledged more than 20 billion euros in security assistance for Ukraine. Many allies, including through the efforts led by France and the United Kingdom, have shown that they're ready, willing, and able to take more responsibility and to help secure peace when the time comes. 80 years ago today, the Second World War ended in Europe. This VE Day, let us not only honor the sacrifices of the past, but also the courage and endurance of all Ukrainians facing war today. They deserve, once again, to live in peace, one that is just and lasting. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, 80 years ago today, Nazism was defeated in Europe, and Europe today is once again in the throes of a brutal war of conquest. It is true that one nation is in active combat duty now on the front lines, trying to thwart this aggression. It's Ukraine, but Russian assault is not only an assault on one nation's sovereignty. It is a challenge, a direct challenge to the European security system and to the global order. And so today, at the Kyiv Security Forum, we're pleased to gather senior military commanders and strategic experts from our partner nations to confront some of these most urgent questions of our time. I invite to join me here at the stage the Admiral Rob Bauer, Chair of the NATO Military Committee in 2021-2025. Lieutenant General J.P.R. Prevost, Chief Professional Conduct and Culture of the Canadian Armed Forces. Major General Dr. Christian Freuding, Director of Joint Planning and Command Staff, Director for Special Staff for Ukraine, Ministry of Defense of Germany. Will be joining us hopefully shortly. And Undersecretary of State of the Defense Ministry of Latvia, General Andis Dilans. And Major General Lars Olof Corneliusson, Strategic Advisor at Directorate of Strategic Plans and Policy at the headquarters of the Armed Forces of Sweden. Welcome, welcome, gentlemen. Before we start our discussion, we have a special video address from Minister of Defense of Belgium, Theo Franken.
Dear friends, it is an honor to address you here at the Kyiv Security Forum. I couldn't make it because I'm in Washington, D.C. for the Munich Security Conference, but I can tell you one thing. Belgium stands at the side of Ukraine. We will support Ukraine, and the new government will do even more to support your beautiful country. We will invest more for aid package, but also military aid package, and we will participate in the coalition of the willing when there's a peace deal. So you can count on Belgium also for the future. Greetings.
And so I have a first question to the entire panel, and I invite your reflections. And the question is about unity. Unity is the theme of this conference. What will it take for the free world to maintain this unity and determination? The kind of unity and determination that is necessary to stop Russian war of aggression. Admiral Bauer, I invite you to reflect first.
I think despite the differences of opinion, I think we need to agree on the most important ones. And one is that we can never accept that if a nation is trying to grab another nation's land, that we accept that to be normal. And I think that is something we have to continue to agree on, as we have done in the last more than 3 years. So I think that is a very important one, very important principle, that we respect sovereignty and internationally recognized borders. Because that is what started the whole problem, that Russia invaded, the full-fledged invasion, of course. It started already in 2014, but in 2022. So that is one. Second, we need to also make sure that there is a just peace for Ukraine, and that in the end we have to continue to support Ukraine to make sure that it is in the best possible and strongest position when any peace negotiations start.
Thank you so much. All right, well, we'll thank a panel possibly at the end. I invite our next speaker.
Yeah, Paul. Paul's my first name. People call me Pepe.
Oh.
That's fine, Mariana. Thank you there. So good morning, all. Quite a pleasure to be here this morning. Quite an honor to be back in Kyiv. I represent my Chief of Defense this morning, which you saw in the video, General Carignan, who would want to be here, but we have a new Prime Minister in Canada, and she's providing advice to the new government there. So, but happy to be back in Kyiv, in the beautiful, and thank you for organizing this there. So Kyiv, for us, a beacon of determination as you continue the fight for your own freedom, but also for all the principles, like Admiral Bauer just mentioned, the principles that underpin our freedom and democracies around the world. So thank you for this fight. To the people of Ukraine that are here with us today, what an inspiring resilience. We're watching from afar, from across the Atlantic, but that resilience is quite inspiring for the soldiers that we saw this morning also. The courage that is admired by all our soldiers that are training you, but also that are back home watching. So congratulations on that. to answer your question there, Mariana, so what will it take? I think, as we've demonstrated in the past, democracies ultimately do what they need to do in the times that are there in front of them. So the response, the response is being shaped here and tested and strengthened in Ukraine, and things will continue to change. I was happily in the post of the Director of our Strategic Joint Staff in Canada as we mounted, as this fight started to mount in the months before, but also the years after. And I think we've all adapted our response. We were inspired as we were all watching from afar how this fight would first turn out, inspired by the way the Ukrainian armed forces blunted the initial blow, but also how, and this is to your question, how I think for the first time we quickly mounted as democracies to support behind Ukraine, not our initial fight, but right away. You could see that as democracies, we gather our support, military equipment forward, and then started gearing the industry to support. So I think we've already united out there. We need to continue. We hear the message of the chairman. We hear the theme of the conference, which is Unite Again. But we have been united from the beginning, and we will continue to be united because it's an important fight there. This fight is not only fought with tanks and trenches, but through cyberspace, through disinformation, through diplomacy by drones, and fear and intimidation. So we need, like you mentioned, the strategy moving forward to combat not only the terrible fight that's happening here, but across the world with the sabotage, like you mentioned. So we need that strategy. I think it's there. You've laid the pillars there, which is support to Ukraine in terms of material, but also the training which we're happily doing in Canada. It was kind of glad to hear Victoria here in front of us, and Valerie and Pavlo, and also Yasheslev. Everything they've asked for, I think we're all together providing from afar. There was no surprise, which shows how we're already united. But it has to continue. We have to continue. Unity is not a one-shot deal. It needs to be renewed, reinvested in. And as we celebrate here this week, victory in Europe, we basically have to honor those who came before us. And as times change, we will continue to form our unity like it was done 80 years ago. That's how I have Mariana. Thank you.
Thank you so much. General Dillons, over to you. You represent a frontline country as well.
Okay. Thank you so much, and thank you, organizers, for having the opportunity to participate in Kyiv's forum. And let me actually start with a well-known phrase: if there is a will, there is a way. And this is the first of all, the unity, what we have to have it among ourselves, and to have a will and to do something. If you are having a clear strategy, what we want to achieve, then we'll be able to also to build it and accomplish it. Regarding the NATO and alliance, of course, we well know that NATO's center of gravity is cohesion and the unity. And that's certainly should remain and prevail. And also we have to put the emphasis on the collective defense as well as on open door policy and the partnerships. And I am true believer that someday also the Ukraine will join the NATO and join the greatest alliance, which already had celebrated last year the 75 years anniversary and was able to adapt and change throughout the history. I said the unity of the threat perception, we have to see the threat among all the allies and the partners, that Russia is an existential threat for all the West, and therefore the policies should be also united. That's shortly for the first round.
Thank you so much, General Dillons. And now, Major General Corneliuson, over to you.
Thank you very much for firstly letting my Supreme Commander to come here, and also for inviting me to the conference. It's a great privilege to be here. Firstly, I want to say that my thoughts always goes to the brave Ukrainians fighting for us on the front lines every day. And they are fighting for us, not only for themselves. And the war is not about only territories. It's about disturbing the international order we have had for such a long time, that we agreed upon the sovereignty of states. I'm a Cold War warrior. Way back, I've been hunting submarines in the Baltics, I've been boarding ships and so forth. We should never forget the Russian objectives, what they are. Firstly, Putin has to stay in power. He declared openly he is in war with the West. We should be reminded about that. And Ukraine is one step in his plan. We will not get rid of Russia without being united towards fighting those goals that Russia has. And he is always dividing EU, dividing NATO, putting small things there for us to argue or fight about, instead of using the unity as a strength. I was working in the Defense Commission as a military expert for 2 years. In the first product we did, all the political parties in Sweden use words that I never heard the politicians use before. We are looking into a Russia that is imperialistic, that has no democracy, and also the word of neo-Stalinism was written by all political parties in Sweden. So the first baseline is, don't ever forget what is the Russian goals. And we can do more, for sure. The way we are working together is showing strength, but we also together can make deterrence that is readable in Moscow. Not what we think is deterrence, but how they read it. And that is the important part of stopping this idea of him influencing our way of living. I think I am there for the first time.
Thank you so much. Admiral Bauer, I'm going to invite you to reflect on what has been said in the panel.
Thank you very much, Mariana. I think the underlying question of this panel is, will good triumph over evil? And my answer is yes, it has and it will. Due to a shift in the tectonic plates of power, the world is seeing an unprecedented number of conflicts. For some conflicts, the difference between right and wrong is increasingly complex and nuanced. But when you look at how Ukraine is bravely resisting aggression, you know this is what right looks like. This is what good looks like. So the fate of the world is being determined right here on the battlefield. And as General Cavoli, Supreme Allied Commander Europe, said in a congressional testimony a few weeks ago, Russia is not winning and Ukraine is not losing. Yes, Russia is reconstituting quickly. And yes, it has set up a war economy and doubled down on investments. But Russia is suffering heavy losses for very little gain. Ukraine, on the other hand, has successfully solved a lot of its manpower issues. It has strong defensive positions, and it is successfully deploying F-16s, which is making a real difference. And it is showing its military brilliance, for instance, by downing Russian jets, by using sea drones with modified US missiles. We are on day 1170 of what the Kremlin thought would be a 3-day war. And actually, we are on day 4090. Russia has sacrificed more than 700,000 of its people, wounded and killed, and it has still not obtained any of its strategic objectives. Without the support of China and other autocratic nations in the world, Russia would never even be able to continue. The presence of President Xi on the Red Square tomorrow is a testimony of the axis of evil growing closer together. And why? Because they are terrified by the power that allied nations are displaying. We are growing stronger by the day. The fact that Mr. Shoigu is writing alarmist messages about Western nations getting ready to prepare themselves to counter a Russian attack is the best compliment we could have gotten. NATO allies are growing more and more resilient. Production levels in our defense industries are going up. Certainly not fast enough, and I will keep being vocal about that, but we are moving in the right direction. NATO will continue to be strong, maybe even stronger than ever. And I know that some people will raise their eyebrows when I say that, but it's true. The US is rightly asking Europe and Canada to do more. Anyone who has a problem with that should look in the mirror and ask themselves if they have done everything they promised to NATO. Only then can they criticize the stance of the Trump administration on this. If Europe and Canada acquire more military capabilities that now only the US has, NATO will be infinitely stronger as a result. And this process was initiated years ago and is based on pure military logic. It makes us far more flexible, and it makes us better equipped to keep on supporting Ukraine, not only to survive, but to thrive as a sovereign nation. And that brings me to a conversation I had yesterday with the people of the Children of the Heroes Foundation here in Ukraine. This is a charity that supports 13,000 children who have lost one or more of their parents in the war, military or civilian. And every day that number grows, unfortunately, by 10 to 20. Children who have gone through hell and sometimes still are. And yet, despite everything they have gone through, despite all the evil they have seen, they still believe in the good of humanity. They are proud of their parents, and rightly so. They believe in their nation. They believe in the cause for which their parents have died. And they believe in a free, sovereign Ukraine. It is up to all of us here in this room and millions more around the world to not let them down and to show them that light will indeed triumph over darkness. Slava Ukraini.
Thank you. Slava. Admiral Bauer, I'm going to stay with you for a minute because when you said NATO will continue to be strong, I must admit that I was one of those people whose eyebrow was somewhat raised. So if I were to push back on you and say, you know, Article 5 is a powerful thing, but it's 4 lines on a piece of paper. And what makes it robust and what makes it effective is everything that stands behind those words. It's decades of joint planning, of force deployment, of military equipment, joint exercises, everything else, in which the United States does play an outsized role. It's not just a matter of financial contributions, it's a matter of planning, which you are very intimately familiar with. Could you speak to that a bit, how perhaps a retreat of the United States from these European security structures might be reconfigured, compensated for by the European allies?
Well, first and foremost, Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State of the United States, a couple of weeks ago, reiterated that the United States is a member of NATO and is not aiming to leave NATO. So that sort of a discussion is not being held at the NATO headquarters. If the US would, and I mean, at the moment, there's 100,000 troops of the US in Europe. 100,000. So they're not taking them out. There's not a decision on that. There's discussions. And that's not the first time. In the last 40 years, there have been more discussions and moments where the US had to reconsider the number of troops in Europe. So if that would happen, I assume it will be the result of a discussion between allies, amongst allies, to make sure there is no void, that there is no, let's say, it is not seen as an opportunity for Russia to use that transition, that change, in a way that they can gain from it. So I think it's not unthinkable that there will be less troops, less American troops in Europe over time. And then European nations and Canada will have to make sure there is a replacement of those troops. And if that is the outcome of a discussion in the next couple of years, then I think NATO has become stronger, because then the nations have more military, have more capabilities to replace those American troops, and Europe is able to basically look after itself more than it has been doing over the last 80 years. So I think it's not bad per se, but it will require a certain amount of time to organize ourselves in that direction. But again, there is no decision from the United States to take out the troops. It might be the case, and then we will have to have a discussion in the alliance how to solve that issue.
Thank you so much. Lieutenant General Prevost, my next question is to you. You were also the commander of Joint Task Force in Afghanistan. You've directed coalition air operations in Doha, Qatar, so you're no stranger to military action. We talk about Western militaries and Western partners supporting and helping Ukraine. What are Western militaries learning from the Ukrainian war, from the Ukrainian armed forces? If you can speak to that.
I sure can. Thanks, Mariana. So we've been involved here in Ukraine as Canadians, training Ukrainian soldiers since 2015. And that never stopped. Even in 2022, we took a few months pause, I would say, to reposition. But we continue to train Ukrainians of all color, I would say, of all services. So we're proud of the work we've done before. Now it's kind of, as we're training them, it's turning around where now we're learning as we're training the recruits. So I think the entire West has adapted. We've looked at technology for sure. Technology was discussed a lot this morning with Victoria and others. We learned from that. We learned from exploiting the material. But we learn also from resilience. Our troops that come here and train, the Ukrainian soldiers come back home and are truly moved. And I think for those of us who are visiting Kyiv today and tomorrow, if you didn't get emotional in the choir this morning, I think everybody felt the same. This is how our troops come back from either London or Poland or elsewhere, training the troops. We are learning tremendously. We're learning at a tactical level, but we're learning at a strategic level as well. The chairman talked about strategy today. We're learning every day about strategy, on how do we tackle this on the long run. How do we need to adapt? We see disinformation is probably what haunts us all in this fight here, to keep us united through that disinformation. And I would say to the question you probably just asked Admiral Bauer, which I hope you're not going to ask me, what I would say is I think Churchill, which we saw plenty this morning on the video, didn't have all the answers, but I think he once said that democracies always do the right thing after they've tried everything else. So that comforts me if he was right.
Well said, absolutely. And we're very happy to be joined right now by Major General Dr. Christian Freuding. Welcome to the panel. And let me turn the floor over to you. We're discussing today unity and a way to stay together to oppose Russian aggression.
Yeah, thank you very much, and my apologies. I was with the official memorial ceremony with the president and just came here in. And of course, it's not by chance that we have today this conference as well on May 8. But I think we are not only here to reflect on history, but to confront our responsibility in the present. And the question before us is, will today's democracies show the unity and the determination needed to stop Russian imperialism. And I think this question is not a rhetorical one. It demands clear answers and, more importantly, concrete action. The first truth we must face is this: Russian aggression in Ukraine is not an isolated conflict. It is a test of the entire democratic order. And if we fail to respond with clarity and strength, we send a dangerous message that borders can be redrawn by brute force and that democracies will hesitate when authoritarianism rises. My second point: unity is not a given, it's a conscious choice. Especially in the 1940s, but not exclusively at that point in history, the Allies had political differences, of course, but they united to confront a common threat. 80 years ago, it was Nazi Germany. Alliances gain strength and they gain power if they are able to overcome their political differences and to focus on a common goal. And this goal is to restore just peace and preserve freedom. Today, this moral core is the same. And if we allow fatigue, economic concerns, or political divisions to fracture our support to Ukraine, we betray our historical legacy. Third point: determination must go beyond speeches. It must mean sustained and increased military support. It means firm sanctions and the readiness to bear economic costs in defense of our values. Democracies often act slowly, but when they do act together, their power is unmatched. And let us not forget, Russia is betting on our indecision more than on its own strength. Final point: we must recognize that this is about more than Ukraine. It is about what kind of world we are willing to build and defend, one governed by international law or one ruled by fear and by force. So, will we match the unity and determination of the past? I am convinced we can, but only if we treat this moment with the seriousness it demands. Let history not remember us for hesitation, but for resolve. That is the lesson we have to learn. That is the moral obligation of our generation, and that is for the sake of mankind. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Major General Ferding, I'm going to stay with you for a minute and ask this follow-on question to you. You mentioned history, that we have to look in the future, but history has a certain weight. We celebrate, or we commemorate today the 80th anniversary of the defeat of Nazi Germany. And there has been a certain perception that perhaps Germany, with its defense establishment, have been weighed down by the history in terms of the military matters, have been somewhat reticent to be more proactive in, defense and military support, or proactive in the European theater. Do you see that shifting? Do you see the Zeitenwende happening? Can you speak to that a bit?
Yes, of course I can speak on that. I think Zeitenwende is really happening, and I think what we see currently in Germany is a major shift in strategic culture. I think the strategic culture of Germany within the European Union, embedded in the European Union, developed over the 90s and the 2000s. But I think the aggression in Europe against Ukraine really marked a shift in our strategic culture. And I think the upcoming decisions when it comes to the NATO summit now with a new government will demonstrate that this shift is with determination, with resolve, and of strategic importance.
Thank you so much. General Dillons, over to you. You represent the country, one of the staunchest supporters of Ukraine historically, but especially throughout this war. But within NATO and the European Union, it seems that for a while the Baltic states have been the kinds of countries that perhaps were out of sync with the mainstream narrative on the Russian threat. Now you represent a country that could say, "We told you so," a while ago. Do you see that shift through the sort of Western core of the alliance in joining your understanding of the Russian aggression, or there are still outliers? How does this interaction happen within the alliance?
As a general, I have learned that geography decides the strategy. I cannot choose the location of my country where I'm located. I cannot choose my neighbor. Of course, I want to have a good and cooperative neighbor with us, but same as Ukraine, we have a neighbor as we have. And if you look from the Arctic down to the Baltic Sea and to the Black Sea, the General Radzinch, one of or twice the commander of the Latvian army in the 20s and 30s. He was also the deputy chief of staff of Hetman government of Ukrainian army back in 1919. Once mentioned, we have to build the alliance among the countries bordering with the Red Russia. And the principle of that alliance should be attack on one country is attack on other one, on all of. And that clearly shows that Article 5 was already proposed by the General Radzinch back in 20s. But unfortunately, due to the difficulties and hurdles of the 20s and the 30s, changes of the government and regimes, that's never happened that we build the alliance. Then we went to the Second World War, and actually, if someone commemorates and celebrates the 80 years anniversary today, no, for Latvia, the Second World War hasn't ended on the 8th of May 1945. It's ended in 1990, 4th of May, 35 years ago. And we just celebrated 35th anniversary of our independence from the Soviet Union, because that was the most terrible period of our country's history. And we therefore understand also the Ukrainian nation quite well. Because we always stand with a country like Ukraine because we have to find the enemy what we are facing. And this is the long-term existential threat. That's, again, I'm coming back to my initial remarks. We have to be united in our threat perception. Everything starts there. If we see the threat rightly, and we could find also the medicine, how to treat this cure, and therefore NATO should be ready. Of course, we need to do our homeworks, increase the capabilities, like integrated air missile defense, ballistic missile defense, and protection of our space and cyberspace, and to maintain the freedom of movement, especially in the maritime domain. There is a lot of homework to do. Of course, the resources is required for that. And we are doing pretty well. My government already agreed and publicly announced that this year we are scaling up our defense budget up to 4% of the GDP, which also will let us some additional funds to help the Ukraine, because there is a governmental decision, 0.25% of our defense budget is devoted to support to Ukraine. Of course, might be in big economies, 120, 115 million euros, it's not a big money, but for us, it's quite a big money. And also it's given to Ukraine because clearly everyone in Latvia, in also other Baltic countries, understand this war has to be finished on conditions, and the Ukraine wins the war. Otherwise, we are kind of peace would face the larger and longer war. Sorry to say.
Thank you so much. Major General Corneliuson, my next question is to you. Your country relatively recently joined the North Atlantic Alliance and is now bolstering this northern flank. Could you speak a bit to how precisely or how exactly this is transpiring for you, your integration into the transatlantic security structures, but also what things could be done today collectively with the Nordics, the other Nordic states, to support Ukraine's effort on the battlefield?
So let's start with the first part of the question in a way that, of course, we, and Rob knows that well, we have been partners of NATO for a long, long, long time. I was the first Swedish officer working in NATO headquarters 2000 in Norfolk, Virginia. So we have prepared ourselves for a long time, interoperability, providing forces to the Balkans, to Afghanistan and so forth. And got a lot of experiences how it is to work within NATO. But it's not Article 5. So the big difference for us today is, of course, to get into the war plans, to be a part of the war plans that is ongoing now, and prepare ourselves for our own planning. We have a position in NATO as a mid-rear area supporting the front states. And at the same time, we are growing in Sweden. The defense expenditure is going from 2.6 and now being discussed going even further up. And that's a big project for a small country to have downsized armed forces for a long period and just turn around 180 degrees and start growing again, building brigades, divisions, and so forth. Of course, it was a lot of new papers that came in when they opened the flood of papers, but that's life. I think we are well prepared. We have started our burden sharing within NATO, providing forces to Latvia, air policing, forward forces headquarters being planned in Finland and so forth, to be a part of the deterrence, frontline deterrence as a country. For me as a professional officer, it was a big change mentally to work with all the allied countries in one common goal, and that is defense and deterrence within the alliance. I think we are on the right track to strengthen the deterrence against Russia together and synchronize it so we send a clear message that is, as I said in the beginning, understood in Moscow, that we will fight for our freedom if we cross the border of a NATO territory or a Gotland or a small island in the Baltic or whatever it is. It's hard work. And connecting that to supporting Ukraine, going back again to the Defense Commission, it was never an issue between the parties to support Ukraine. And you have seen our efforts, what we have done so far. And I think also we are on the right track to produce material together with Ukraine. We learn from them. We are doing it together. We can export technology, but at the same time we need to have the experience from the battlefield to make it more efficient. And I think Sweden also has gone into the process of supporting Ukraine with not only giving stuff, but creating stuff together that we will benefit from coming out of Ukraine to our defense. And I think that is the right way of supporting a nation that is fighting for their freedom. It goes both ways. I heard it several times during this conference. I stop there.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you. So let me put kind of collectively a question to the whole panel, and perhaps we can go in the reverse order. You know, in the previous discussion and previous panel with the Ukrainian defenders, we talked that there's significant asymmetries between the resources of Russia and resources of Ukraine, of course, that are being helped by Ukrainian partners and allies. But if you look collectively, of course, at Europe, perhaps not even the whole of NATO, right? But even the European NATO, that asymmetry evens out significantly between Russia and the allies. Clearly, not the whole scope, right, could be leveraged for Ukraine's aid. But some of it surely could be leveraged better, so Ukraine does not face this asymmetric and disadvantageous situation. Could you each speak a little bit to some of the main impediments to bringing to bear more of the European NATO's might for Ukraine's assistance? And with us knowing what the impediments are, perhaps we can strategize how to remove them.
Well, I think we're starting from a point where Europe need to beef up their forces to be having this deterrence that they can read properly in Moscow. But I think that we can... What would be the cost of a war in Europe? If you put that in comparison what we are paying now for helping Ukraine, it's a big difference. And we should remind that we are helping ourselves by helping Ukraine, because the cost of a war in Europe is going to be something totally different. So we can afford to do more. That is what I'm saying.
That's very well put. Thank you so much. Over to you.
Statistics actually shows that all the wars are won by the economies and supreme technologies or innovative technologies. Therefore, the main emphasis for the support Ukraine should be put on economies, because economic strength is a decisive factor in the history of the conflicts and international security today. Therefore, as you know, that Russia's military capacity has benefited quite a lot from the increased revenues of oil and gas. Once, or some time ago, the U.S. Senator McCain said that Russia is a gas station pretending to be a country. And actually this said, if you really want to stop the gas flow and oil flow from Russia to Europe and any other countries, you can stop the war very easily. But again, this is what I said at the very beginning. It's the will. The political will is the most important thing in order to do it. Therefore, we have to revise the sanctions, which doesn't really work to the aims they were imposed on Russia. We have to be serious about the economic sanctions, and that will kind of stop the flow of revenues into the military industry of Russia. If you look at Russia's military industrial base currently, they are capable also of producing the electronic warfare capability. They're also quite well in a drone capability development and competing. Therefore, Ukrainian forces on a daily basis struggling to compete with what the Russians made. And also they are able to produce new tanks, new missiles, and to store them and stock them. And quite many of them are not going just to the front line here in Ukraine. They are going to the newly re-established Leningrad military district. And Leningrad military district, this is exactly the district which borders with the NATO and EU countries. And what for they are created, think about it just a moment. Therefore, if you would like to avoid the further escalations in the wars, we have to stop or we have to put the sanctions in order to stop the flow of Russia's gas and oil to Western and other countries, make them richer on a daily basis.
Thank you so much. Major General Freuding, over to you.
If we agree that we need to help Ukraine prevailing in this conflict, and if we agree that this is a test of our generation, then we are doing too less. And I think we have to step up and to do more and to support the Ukrainian armed forces to equalize the Russian military power. I think what we achieved over the last year to go into the depths of military technicalities is we equaled Russian military power with regard to artillery. We equaled Russian military power with regard to drone, and this is possible due to the innovation power of the Ukrainian industry as well. And I think we should make use more of this innovative power of the Ukrainian military industry. And the big question is, and I completely agree with my colleague who underlines the importance of industry and industrial capacities for a long war. Have we done enough to step up our production capacities within the industry, and did we achieve enough progress with regard to this over the last 3 years? And I think there is really room for improvement, the need to step up. I think we will hear later more about this, Commissioner. And I think if you unite the industrial power and the innovative power of the Ukrainian defense industries and the defense industries of Europe, we are able to not only equalize the Russian military complex, but to outproduce them and then winning this war.
That's an excellent point. Thank you so much. I think, that's part of filling anything that could be written down on the paper in the way of guarantees with actual operational backing. It's those joint defense projects. I'm going to go to Lieutenant General Prevost with the same question about impediments.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, the question was about asymmetry here in Ukraine. I think so far, obviously, after 3 years or 1170 days, that asymmetry has not shown too much, although terrible losses have been made, and we recognize that it's here. But it's true also, in your question, you mentioned the asymmetry is on our side as democracies overall. I think the might that we all collect together is greater, and I think Putin knows this, and this is how his strategy has unfolded so far. So we have to recognize that. As we mount more support for Ukraine, we do have to, Canadians, for instance, who live across the ocean, we have to think deterrence. Deterrence is probably a lot cheaper than full war. So we continue. We've invested, Canada, in all our troops. I would say pretty much all our baskets and our troops that are deployed are either in Latvia with our partner there as we mount a brigade, or in Poland and elsewhere supporting Ukraine. So our forces that are forward are supporting Ukraine. Our forces that are back are mounting deterrence. Canada lives on another continent, but our closest neighbor after the US is Russia. And throughout the Cold War, how we were able to deter was through NORAD, for instance. So we have to continue to invest in deterrence, and that's how we're going to continue to invest in deterrence, which will hopefully contain and bring not only peace but victory on this side here as we continue to plan. The military officer's job is to plan constantly, and that's what we're doing right now. How do we adapt our support to Ukraine so we can get to peace faster there, deter further aggression, but also get to peace faster? So our job is to do this. This is exactly what we're doing. We're looking at options continuously, and more is to come. Our new Prime Minister already talked to President Zelensky, offered our support over time here so we can get the good security needed here in Kyiv. So we all know that the outcomes of war are normally always determined by morale or material attrition. I think all of our job today, which is, we thank you for putting the forum together, because that's why we're here, to determine how we can continue to build the morale and the material necessary to win this war faster than Russians can. Thank you.
Let me just follow up with you with one more sort of follow-up clarifying question. You mentioned Russia is Canada's neighbor, of course, and the Arctic region is becoming increasingly active and increasingly challenging. If you could just speak to that for a little bit, how is your country, Canada, facing that challenge in the Arctic?
Yeah, it's been the approach from Russia to North America over the last 60-odd years. 1958, I think, is when NORAD stood up. So it's always been our closest approach. We've kept an eye on. We probably had let an eye off that ball right after the wall came down, but we're back on it, rebuilding NORAD. So NORAD is our first effort there. Our government published our new defense strategy last spring called Our North Strong and Free, all eyes in Canada on defending the Arctic. It's not only our Arctic, but it's also, we have Sweden here with us. Now NATO has expanded all the way to the Arctic. It's all our Arctic. It's a contested area, not only by Russia, by others. It will become a battlefield, so we do have to put an eye there, not only to defend it, but mainly to deter there as we move forward. Important part of it. The more we de-risk North America, I think we've learned that lesson twice in history, the more we de-risk North America, the better we are prepared or deterring for a full war in Europe. So that's what we're doing in Canada. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And yes, Admiral Bauer, over to you about asymmetry and the ways to deal with it.
Yeah, I'm extremely happy Mr. Kubelius is with us today, because I think he will become more and more instrumental in making Europe more effective when it comes to security. Because I think that is one of the things Europe has always been extremely good at, being efficient. But I think we have gone too far there. I think we have focused on efficiency as the sole sort of North Star in everything we did in the last 80 years. But I think what a war proves again is that it's only about effectiveness. And so I think that is something Europe has to become better in. When it comes to the things you asked on the resources and the asymmetry, one of the problems we have done is we have exported fragmentation. There is fragmentation in Europe when it comes to weapon systems. I think we have 172 different weapon systems in Europe when it comes to tanks, frigates, fighter aircraft, armored vehicles, guns, etc., versus 30 in the US. And we have exported that fragmentation to Ukraine, which of course basically creates a nightmare. There's 14 different types of 155mm grenades. If you give a box of grenades to the Ukrainians, they might look at it and say, can't use it, and give it back to you, because they don't have the guns with which they can use the shells. So that is ridiculous. And we have to, so therefore we have to improve on standardization. NATO is the authority when it comes to standardization. We have the STANAGs, the standardization agreements. But the problem is it's in a way voluntary to nations. I mean, NATO says this is how a grenade has to look like. And then 14 nations in NATO might say, we have the right to deviate from the standard, which is not helpful when you try to achieve standardization. So in a way, we have to improve ourselves there, and especially in Europe, we have to improve and reduce the fragmentation in the number of systems. So that is one, standardization, less different systems. Second is, if we do that, that will lead to more the ability to go to more joint procurement. If we do that, we actually provide the industry with the long-term demand signal they are asking for, because the industry says, yeah, the governments have been rather unreliable clients over the last 40 years, so therefore we need long-term demand signals, otherwise we're not going to invest in the industry. So if we do more joint procurement, because we have more standardization, then we can provide the long-term demand signal. And third, we need to make sure that we align with the financial world, because in the financial world, and we're talking banks and we're talking pension funds, they still talk about investments in the defense industry as not being ethical. I honestly don't understand what defending yourself, what there is unethical about defending yourself. But secondly, they talk about the sustainability goals being against this. Well, to those people, and I've talked in the last 2.5 years to many bankers and pension funds chairmen, etc. But I say, if you see what war does, go to Ukraine. And if you see that, then you understand that preventing war and the idea of NATO is to prevent war. So if we have a strong defense and we invest in stronger armed forces, and larger stockpiles of ammunition, etc., then actually you become more, not only more resilient, but also the deterrence goes up. And therefore, it is in the interest of sustainability to have strong armed forces. But it is a deep sentiment in the financial world, and I hope, and there's some signs that the European Union will also work on this to make sure that that thinking goes away.
Thank you so much. And let me just thank all of you for making the time, for making the trip to join us here today, for your participation, sharing your thoughts. I know I've learned a lot, and for your support of Ukraine and its fight in the past, in the present, and in the future. Thank you all so very much. And now I am very, very pleased to announce a very, very special session with a person who's a long-term friend of this forum, but also a very long-term friend of and supporter of Ukraine. European Commissioner for Defense and Space, former Prime Minister of Lithuania, Andrius Kubilius. I invite Arsenij Yatsenyuk to come up on stage and introduce our speaker, and then proceed with a sort of collegial conversation once we have the stage set up for it. We're very pleased to have you, Mr. Kubilius. All right, all good. Arsenij, please, the floor is yours.
Mr. Prime Minister, no need an introduction. You are the 2 times Prime Minister, the first ever Defense Commissioner in the European Union. So we believe that your mandate and your portfolio is an immense one. You are running an extraordinary office. And I would be delighted to invite you to deliver a very strong, uniting message to the Ukrainian audience. And we would be happy to listen what kind of action plan the European Union is ready to unfold in terms of bringing real peace and security to the European Union and to Ukraine. The floor is yours, Mr. Prime Minister.
Dear Arsenij, dear colleagues, well, first of all, thanks a lot really for inviting me back to this very, very well-known and important forum. And on that, day, exactly, on 8th of May. And I will try, I understand that everybody, expects from me to make, very clear numbers, how much we shall produce and so on, and how it will be done. I would like, first of all, really to use my few minutes, to look a little bit broader. What is really going on in the whole, world, in Europe, in Ukraine, and what is the responsibility of our generation, which is very much related really with the military things, but nevertheless, we need to see also a little bit of this, historical perspective. So definitely, I will not maybe go too much back into the history, but today is a Victory in Europe Day. Today we remember unconditional surrender of Nazi Germany 80 years ago, exactly on this day. And to me, this day is also about the heroism and suffering of Ukraine. Suffering because in the 20th century, Ukraine was a battlefield and killing ground for 2 monstrous totalitarian tyrannies, Nazi Germany and Stalinist Russia. 8 to 10 million Ukrainians were killed or died during the Second World War, a quarter of population. Just 10 years after millions starved to death, killed by Stalin in the man-made famine of the Holodomor. And Victory in Europe Day is about the heroism of Ukraine, because millions of Ukrainians fought against the Nazis, in allied armies as soldiers, as partisans, and helped to destroy a regime responsible for terror, murder, and genocide on a global scale. And that heroism we see still today in the streets and battlefields of Ukraine. Victory Day is about victory, and it is about peace. But 80 years ago, Cold War followed World War, and Iron Curtain fell across the continent. In the West, freedom, but constant military threat. In the East, Soviet occupation and communist dictatorship. One totalitarian tyranny replaced the other. As you know, I am from Lithuania. For me and for people in Ukraine, freedom came delayed, 45 years later. We got freedom only in 1990, in 1991. I was born in 1956. I can still say that I lived almost half of my life. It was exactly last year when I crossed this, mark. I lived half of my life under Russian occupation. And I still remember what it was like. Oppression and liberation. That is my personal experience. And I can say that I don't want that again for my children and grandchildren. And the future of my children and grandchildren, the future of Europe today depends on Ukraine. Because today, 2 years later, we still hear echoes of the past. Then, as now, the invader came like a bandit in the night. Then, as now, it started with bombs on Kyiv. Once again, an aggressor seeks to enslave Ukraine and dominate Europe. This time, it's Putin's Russia. Russia is fighting a war of aggression against Ukraine. And we know, as our intelligence services are saying, Russia could have enough weapons to test NATO Article 5 and attack one or more European Union countries during the next several years. That is why we need to remember that today, history and future of the history is made in Ukraine. The future of Ukraine, the future of Russia, the future of Europe, the future of our kids and grandkids is decided on the battlefields of Ukraine. But history is important not only for memories. History is also important for lessons. How not to repeat tragic mistakes of the history. Today I see the danger that we can repeat some of the most tragic mistakes from European history of the 20th century. And that is why I want to speak openly about that, because this is the only way how we can avoid them. The first mistake, lack of military support to Ukraine. During 3 years of the war, annually, both the European Union and the United States was giving military support of around 40 billion euros, more or less 20 billion on each side. But each side military support is less than 0.1% of their GDP. Both 0.1% of United States GDP, less than 0.1, and less than 0.1% of EU GDP. European Union is spending now in average 2%. United States spends 3.4% of GDP on their own defense. NATO is going to agree on 3.5% requirement, which is far more than we are giving to Ukraine. Why such a difference? Why do we think that today it is more important to take care only about our own defense capabilities, but not about sufficient Ukraine capabilities when Ukraine is defending us against the same enemy? I don't understand such a military logic or political logic. Maybe we can have a more balanced approach. We cannot repeat the mistake of middle of 1930s when the democratic West was not investing into the need to stop Hitler at the very beginning. Second mistake, inability to make a difference in between of aggressor and the victim, at least by somebody. Let's remember Ronald Reagan, who was saying, don't be afraid to see what you see. We need not to be afraid to see that Russia is an aggressor and Ukraine is a victim. And to answer the question, with whom we are standing. For me, for us, the answer is clear. But it looks that for somebody still it takes time to understand. Third possible mistake, the promise to have good relations with aggressor Putin. The big mistake, in my view, is to declare the strategic interest to establish good relations with aggressor Putin after peace will be established. NATO and all of us, we consider Russia the biggest threat to European security, and NATO plan to radically ramp up preparedness to defend and to deter Russian aggression. It is impossible to plan to be friendly with the biggest threat and to demand bigger defense spending in order to deter the biggest threat. Implementation of the promises of friendship with aggressor Putin will embolden Putin to continue his internal and external aggressive policies, will bring confusion to the whole Western world of democracies, and again will encourage aggressiveness by other authoritarian regimes. The fourth mistake, recognition of occupation of Crimea. History teaches clear lessons about the leadership. In the critical moments, leaders can play the role of Chamberlain or role of Churchill, Roosevelt, or Reagan. Chamberlain was expecting that he can agree with Hitler in Munich 1938 on peace and friendship, and demanded that Czechoslovakia would give part of its territory, Sudetenland, to Hitler. That was, as we remember, the beginning of the road to Second World War. Churchill, Roosevelt, and Reagan were fighting for freedom and against evil empires, and they succeeded. To demand that Ukraine would give part of its territory to aggressor Putin is simple and tragic repetition of the historic mistake of Chamberlain. And fifth mistake, support to the formula no NATO for Ukraine. Russia demands no NATO for Ukraine not because they are afraid of NATO offense against Russia using territory of Ukraine, but because they are afraid that NATO will defend Ukraine against next Russia aggression. Support to formula no NATO for Ukraine makes Russia planning of next aggression against Ukraine more easy. And here I want to use this occasion also to say a few words about Russia, about tragedy of Russia and about the future of Russia. Russia's war against Ukraine is a global tragedy. Russia's war against Ukraine creates an incredible number of tragedies for Ukraine. The war again raises memories about the tragic history of the European continent in the 20th century. Can we avoid another pan-European tragic war, similar to First World War or Second World War? But paradoxically, this war waged by Putin is also a tragedy for the Russian nation. With this war, Russia excluded itself from the global community of normal, non-aggressive countries. Trajectory of Russia's development slowly is going down and will continue to follow such a direction if there will be no domestic political will for dramatic change back to normality. It is clear that it will not happen with Putin in power. The history of humanity is full of examples how nations, famous in the history, or civilizations were not able to change the downward trajectory of their development, and simply they disappeared from the future of history. The historic roots of the tragedy of Russia are very clear. During the Second World War, Russians, together with Ukrainians, Belarusians, Americans, Brits, and many other nations, all together managed to defeat fascism of Nazi Germany, but later Russians, without a real fight, lost the battle against their own internal, we can call some sort of national fascism, mixture of nostalgic Russian imperialism and autocratic Bolshevism. In the 21st century, on the European continent, everybody wants to have good relations with their neighbors, including good relations with Russia. The Baltics have the strongest interest in that because of our historic experience. But good relations depend only on one condition. Is Russia able to become a normal country? You cannot have good relations with an aggressor, especially if you are living in its neighborhood or on the European continent, not separated from aggressive Russia by Atlantic Ocean. That is why everybody in democratic Europe needs to make a clear decision. What they want? Good relations with Putin, knowing that it will just prolong tragedy of Russia and threats to Europe, or good relations with normal Russia of the future, which maybe will manage to come back, if Russian people will be helped to understand what are the alternative directions of Russia's future development. Downward with global isolation and imperial aggression, supported by autocratic Bolshevism of Putin, or possibility of normal Russia without aggression and autocracy, but with re-established global relations, including with the European Union. If we agree that aggressive Russia was, is, and will stay as the biggest threat for European security, which will not disappear even if the peace will be established, there is a need for democratic West to have a clear strategy what to do with such a permanent threat. It is not enough just to strengthen Ukraine's or European Union's defense capabilities against aggressive Russia. It is paramount importance for the European Union to have a long-term strategy how to assist Russia to become a non-aggressive normal neighbor of the European Union. This is how permanent threats to Europe will disappear. Our support to creation of success of Ukraine is the single most important strategic tool in such a strategy towards Russia, since Ukraine's success can inspire Russian people to follow this example. Putin is afraid of such an inspiration and of the possible dreams of Russian people to have a normal life. Putin is himself the tragedy for the future of Russia, and his regime is not so permanent as it looks at the moment. The European Union needs to have a strategy how to help Russian people to have a different, not so tragic future for themselves. That would be also the biggest benefit for the security of the whole Europe. Today, when we have such a historical gathering, we need to talk not only about urgency and the strategic defense needs of today, but also about longer-term future of Europe. In my view, we face two different timeframes with different security challenges. The first challenge, most urgent, Russia's aggression against Ukraine and the possibility of Russian aggression against EU and NATO member states before 2030. The second challenge is for the longer term, the next decade. China's rising military power, and as a result, the United States shifting its attention more and more to the Indo-Pacific, at the same time diminishing their presence on the European continent. As the white paper on the future of European defense says, a new international order will be formed in the second half of this decade and beyond. And that is why we need to act based on our long-term strategy, because history will not forgive us for inaction. Defending Europe is an European task. Those are the words of my mission letter. Today, quite often, myself and various Europeans were repeating the self-evident truth that 450 million Europeans should not ask 340 million Americans to permanently defend us against 140 million Russians who are not able to defeat 38 million Ukrainians. Economically, we are strong and powerful enough to take our defense into our hands, but it will take time. Looking into longer-term future, it will not be enough to spend more on defense and to produce more defense weapons. In order to defend ourselves, it is essential that we develop an European security architecture, as stated in my mission letter. Our strategic goal is to unite all efforts to strengthen European defense into a true European defense union. Ukraine today is playing a crucial role in the urgent defense of Europe, and it will play a most important role in the longer-term development of European defense readiness, in development of new European security architecture, in the process of building a true European defense union. That is why we need to understand the strategic significance of our long-term strategy on Ukraine. And our Ukrainian strategy is based on three pillars of integration. First, security integration. European security formula is very simple. Europe whole, free and at peace. Freedom needs to be defended and expanding more and more towards the eastern part of European continent. Formula for peace, peace through strength, can be implemented only with us giving additional substantial strength to Ukraine. That can be achieved with increased defense assistance to Ukraine. And as Commission President Ursula von der Leyen is repeating, the best security guarantee for Ukraine is porcupine strategy, strengthening Ukrainian defense and military capabilities to the level of real deterrence. As Commission President repeats, our best investment into security of Europe is our investment into security of Ukraine. The new European Union program, Rearm Europe, And safe loans are creating possibilities for European Union member states to increase military support to Ukraine through joint procurement of weapons together with Ukraine, from Ukraine and for Ukraine. And we're establishing the joint European Union-Ukraine Task Force for exploitation of safe loans, and such a new arrangement will be very helpful. And I am really hopeful that with that instrument, we can make a big change in our support for defense capabilities of Ukraine. Second, it's defense integration. Integration of European and Ukrainian defense industries is becoming a very important part of our agenda. New opportunities are opening with forthcoming European Defense Industry Program. On forthcoming Monday, very important European Union-Ukrainian Defense Industries Forum will be held in Brussels. Ukrainian defense industry is showing unbelievable successes. We can support Ukrainian defense industry with our financial and industrial strengths, but Ukrainian defense industry can support European defense industry with Ukrainian know-how, remarkable skills of innovation and modernization. Warfare doctrinal integration also can help us to understand the significance of Ukrainian drone army in order for us to be able to repeat that on our side. New initiatives of our integration in this field also are coming. And the last, European integration. It is symbolic that today we remember 8th of May, the end of war. Tomorrow we shall remember 9th of May, the beginning of European unity. European integration proposed by Schuman Declaration on 9th of May in 1950s had a very clear goal: to protect peace and avoid wars on the European continent through unification of Europe. As Commission President said yesterday, Ukrainian accession to the European Union can be the strongest guarantee. That is why Ukrainian membership in the EU is needed not only for Ukraine, but also for the whole European Union. That is why, as Commission President also have said, we are working hard with Ukraine to open all negotiation clusters in 2025. And the best way to finish is again to quote Commission President. Ukraine joining our Union is the greatest guarantee of a just and lasting peace. In our history, peace and European integration have always gone hand in hand. So let us bring Ukraine inside of our Union. Let us walk the path of peace together. This is the most important responsibility of our generation. Slava Ukraini!
So, Commissioner, you are a seasoned politician, and you always stand your ground, and you always stand your values. Is it okay if I ask you several questions slightly far beyond your mandate? Thank you.
So you will get my private opinion.
Thank you. Well, I do appreciate this. So here is the thing. First of all, let me praise you personally, and we are very grateful for your personal contribution and that you've decided to pay the visit to Ukraine. And the top military NATO brass that right now in Ukraine is another clear sign where the free world stands. But my question is as follows. Right now, on the Red Square, the war criminal Putin is orchestrating a military parade. And at least two heads of governments of the European Union participate in this parade. It's Hungary and Slovakia. Something is completely wrong with this. The slogan of this very forum is Unite Again. The question I have, Commissioner, is whether Europe is really united. Having in mind that we have actually two vetoes against, could be supposed vetoes, against an extension of sanctions. And the idea is both to wrap up sanctions and actually to make Ukraine an EU member state. So my question is whether you can handle this, Commissioner.
Well, thanks a lot for a very good question. I am not so sure if member states would agree that Commission can handle them. it's maybe vice versa, you know. But really, we need to see, you know, with a very clear eyes, there is a problem. European Union member states are not united absolutely. Perhaps this is not, you know, not something very exceptional. It's natural. The question is how we are performing in such situations. And that is what perhaps we are facing, and maybe we shall face even deeper problems with the, you know, decision-making process inside of European Union, which demands unanimity, especially in foreign affairs and defense issues. So that is, you know, how the treaties are written. There is quite a deep debate inside of European Union, and there was a conference on the future of Europe. And one of the major points was, from that conference on the future of Europe, was proposals that we need to abandon this, you know, unanimity requirement, and we need to go to what I call normal democratic decision-making, when majority is making decision. You know, those who disagree, they can, you know, vote against, but nevertheless, you know, democratic majority is able to make decisions. Still, that is not in place. But I am optimist and believer in the future of Europe. And I'm always quoting one of the famous statements by Jean Monnet, one of those, you know, godfathers of European community. He said at the very beginning, when Rome Treaty was signed, that European community will be created during the crisis. And what will be created during the crisis, that will be community. So we can see a lot of evidence that exactly community was developing itself in such a way. When was financial crisis 2008, 2012, we got, you know, decision on banking union. When was pandemic, European Union went the first time to borrow, you know, in the markets. When we have now defense crisis, we have, you know, established commissioner position. Maybe we shall come to governance crisis, which will push us really to make, you know, those decisions which are needed. So that's my, a little bit complicated, not direct answer, but nevertheless, I believe that, you know, that it will go in such a way.
I've got your point. Sanctions will be extended, as far as I understand.
I would hope.
Good. Thank you. Commissioner, if I may turn to your portfolio and to your mandate. Look, Ukraine in this war severely degraded Russian military, land forces. Look at the Russian economy. Okay? Right now, I can't say that Russian economy is in a complete shatters, but it's in a dire state. War criminal Putin and Russia lost around 1 million of those who had been killed and wounded. So it's a staggering numbers. And Ukraine contributed a lot to, not just contributed, Ukraine actually stopped Russian military. You've announced rearm program. And Ukraine is a real stronghold, and we can provide a battle-hardened equipment, experience, cutting-edge technology. So we can do a lot together, and having in mind that we have the biggest and the strongest military on the continent. So my question, Commissioner, the first one is, what is your time frame? What is your timetable to rearm Europe? That's the first one. The second, whether you are ready to use $300 billion of Russian frozen assets, both to help Ukraine and to rearm Ukraine. And the third one, which is more, I would say, specific, peculiar, and economic one. If you compare the numbers, if you compare the cost of the ammo, of the ammunition and weaponry produced by, for example, Russia and North Korea, it's at least 5 times lower than the cost of similar tanks, artillery, ammo produced in the European Union and in the United States. I believe that we need to increase competitiveness, and we need to focus on some kind of parity purchasing power in military, because distinguished and honorable generals and top military brass, they don't care about the numbers of billions of dollars. They care about the shells, the tanks, their armored vehicles, missiles, and the rest of the stuff. So, 3 questions.
Well, the first question was about calendar, if I am, yeah. So definitely, as I said, we have, and I'm repeating that everywhere. From one side, we have agency threats, agency challenges, with what different intelligence services of European member states, of NATO member states are predicting that Russia can be ready for aggression against EU or NATO member states before 2030. So we need to be, ready with our numbers, with our capabilities, where we are working very closely with NATO on capability targets, and we need to, ramp up production and procurement, joint procurement, and things like that. That is, short-term agenda. Longer-term agenda is what I'm repeating everywhere, that because we need to see very clearly that perhaps during next decade, because of Chinese rising military power, our transatlantic partners will shift more and more towards Indo-Pacific, and we need to be ready for that. Again, we need to have a very clear plan, how we are strengthening ourselves, how we are building our capabilities in agreement with the partners, because that will take time. So two time frames. And definitely, speed is essential here, and we need to, again, to move ahead with our decision-making processes. Some decisions on important legal regulations are, too long discussed in the Parliament or in the Council, but we're moving ahead. Now, your second question was...
Russians' $300 billion that have been frozen.
Yes, that's again, the question how we can use those frozen assets. Till now, as I understand, there was some kind of hesitation about real legal confiscation of those assets, because, and that hesitation comes from banking sector, from European Central Bank. I don't want to argue on those, on some kind of those, arguments against confiscation. I think that we can really look for new ways of how those Russian frozen assets can be used. There are different proposals from experts, for example, to use those assets as a guarantees for loans which can be taken by Ukraine. Maybe that is possible. And in any case, really, in general, I see the need that our assistance, and especially military assistance to Ukraine, should move from donations of the weapons to giving Ukraine possibility of access to additional big financial resources. Because, as you have said, Ukrainian industry is able to produce very good modern weapons, 2 times cheaper than European production, big quantities with very high speed of production, and that is what from one side really it would help with the same financial resources which we are devoting for military support of Ukraine, to have something like 2 times more of real practical assistance. That is very simple, mathematics. So we need to be, again, very practical from that point of view. And definitely we need to look into how we can integrate our industries on a much larger scale, really, helping your industry to, with our, industrial possibilities and our financial resources, but also learning from your industry a lot. Sometimes I am, asking some kind of, rhetorical question to myself. When we're talking about Ukrainian defense industry integration with European defense industry, for me the question sometimes is, who is going to integrate with whom? My point is that, for European defense industry to integrate with Ukrainian defense industry is really very, very important also. And on purchasing power parity, you're absolutely right. That is what we need to keep in mind. And at least I saw some experts saying that if to measure Russian defense spending, not in nominal, dollars or euros, but in purchasing power parity, then it appears that Russia this year will spend more of financial resources than all the European Union member states are going to spend.
Thank you. I am not allowed to grill you anymore. That's the point I've got. So it is a great honor, Commissioner, and your task is very challenging. But our joint task is to celebrate another victory day in Europe when Ukraine is to prevail, and Ukraine will prevail.
Thanks a lot, Arsenia, and I'm absolutely sure that this will happen. But again, what I said in my final words, we need to understand that this is, strategic task of our generation. It's not the task of Ukrainians. It's not a task of some leaders. It's a task for our generation of the whole of Europe and of the whole democratic world.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you all, dear guests, for joining us this morning. We now will have a short coffee break.